Our next reading from the Word of the Lord is from the Gospel of John, chapter 7. And the discussion in this story also follows a miracle that the Lord did in which he healed somebody on the Sabbath. Now, about the middle of the feast, Jesus went up into the temple and taught. And the Jews marveled, saying, "How does this man know letters, having never studied?" Jesus answered them and said, "My doctrine is not mine, but his who sent me. If anyone wills to do his will, he shall know concerning the doctrine, whether it is from God or whether I speak on my own authority. He who speaks from himself seeks his own glory, but he who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is true, and no unrighteousness is in him. Did not Moses give you the law? And yet none of you keeps the law. Why do you seek to kill me?" The people answered and said, "You have a demon. Who is seeking to kill you?" Jesus answered and said to them, "I did one work, and you all marvel. Moses therefore gave you circumcision, not that it's from Moses, but from the fathers. And you circumcise a man on the Sabbath. If a man receives circumcision on the Sabbath so that the law of Moses should not be broken, are you angry with me because I made a man completely well on the Sabbath? Do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment." And our final reading is the 85th Psalm. To the preeminent, to the sons of Korah, a song. O Jehovah, you have been pleased with your land. You have returned the captives of Jacob. You have lifted the iniquity of your people. You have covered all their sin. Selah. You have gathered up all your fury. You have turned back from the burning of your anger. Turn us, O God of our salvation, and end your indignation with us. Will you be angry with us forever? Will you prolong your anger from generation to generation? Will you not turn and revive us, that your people may rejoice in you? Show us your mercy, Jehovah, and give us your salvation. I will hear what God Jehovah will speak, for he will speak peace to his people and to his merciful ones, that they may not turn back to folly. Surely his salvation is near to those who fear him, to make glory abide in our land. Mercy and truth have met. Righteousness and peace have kissed. Truth will spring up from the earth, and righteousness will look down from the heavens. Yes, Jehovah will give what is good, and our land will give her produce. Righteousness will go before his face, and will make his footfalls a pathway. Amen. Mercy and truth have met together. Righteousness and peace have kissed. Those words describe almost literally a marriage of good and truth. Mercy and love and righteousness are qualities of love, and peace is a quality of truth. Those things meet together and are joined as in marriage. There's a lot said in the teachings of the new church about the marriage of good and truth. We're taught that the marriage of a man and a woman is from the marriage of good and truth. And even aside from anything said about marriages between people, there's a lot said about marrying good and truth together within ourselves. And those teachings may strike us as very important or very beautiful, but it's also not easy to come to a concrete understanding of what the marriage of good and truth really is. Good and truth are both completely abstract terms, and when you put abstract things together, you get an abstract union. Good and truth are married when you do both of them together, but what does that really mean? Because these ideas are vague, it's easy to set them aside. But in the Word, the Lord illustrates the marriage of good and truth in reality, in action. And He illustrates it most powerfully in Himself, in the things that He does and He says. So both of today's readings from the Gospel about the Lord healing on the Sabbath illuminate the marriage of good and truth. In the first reading, the children's talk reading, the Lord ends His debate with the Pharisees saying, "It is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." And the point is pretty clear. Doing good is more important than keeping the Sabbath, or at least more important than the level of keeping the Sabbath that the Pharisees were fixated on. He says to them, "If you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless." Sacrifice, or offering burnt offerings on an altar, was the focus and the primary component of most ritual in the Jewish church. And so sacrifice can be understood as a reference to ritual in general. So the Lord is saying that mercy is more important than ritual. And He goes on to list a whole bunch of ways that people have broken or are breaking laws having to do with ritual, but are blameless because they break the law for the sake of something higher. So He says David ate the showbread because he was running from an enemy and he was hungry. Priests work on the Sabbath. A man who saves the lost sheep on the Sabbath is obviously doing something right. In the world that we live in now, these are not hard teachings to accept. Hard for the Pharisees maybe, but who here wouldn't do these sorts of things? Is any bread too holy to give to somebody in need? Or if somebody had a medical emergency and you were driving them to the hospital and going way too fast and you got pulled over, wouldn't you expect that the police officer would let you go as soon as they understood what was happening? It's not hard to see that the specifics of the law matter less than doing good. And it's also not hard for us to see that the Lord's law is not designed to make those who keep it more important or a higher class of being than those who don't keep it. The Pharisees did think that it worked that way. So when the Lord ate with tax collectors and sinners, they condemned Him. And the Lord answered, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. For I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." Again, the point is just resoundingly clear. Breaking the law does not mean it's all over. The Lord has mercy still. Again, in that passage, he says, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Those words are originally from the book of Hosea, and the full quote reads, For I desire mercy and not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God more than burnt offerings. That statement pairs mercy with the knowledge of God, and it pairs sacrifice and burnt offering. Sacrifice and burnt offering are obviously the same thing. And so the implication is that mercy and the knowledge of God are at least somewhat the same. To be merciful is to know God, or to know the will of God. His will for us is mercy. What he teaches in these stories makes so much sense. What is good is higher than the law. What's challenging about these teachings is that they don't mean that the law doesn't matter. The Lord seems to set a precedent for throwing out the law, throwing out the teachings of the Word, if we can see something good that seems to be hindered by the teachings of the Word. But that's not what the Lord did, and not what he teaches us to do. As I said in the children's talk, the Lord does command the keeping of the Sabbath, and he never takes back that commandment. And later on in the Gospel, when he's accusing the Pharisees of hypocrisy, he says to them, Woe to you, for you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done, without leaving the others undone. Even those minute things, tithing your herbs, was a commandment in the Lord's Word. And he never gave us license to do away with any of his commandments, even the trivial ones. Several times now, he's come to us with a new revelation in which he changes our understanding of what it means to keep his law. But the spirit of obedience to the law, he never dismisses. And in fact, he says, Do not think that I came to destroy the law and the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. Whoever therefore breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. The Lord came to fulfill the law. And that statement is a key to understanding the marriage of good and truth. The Lord came to complete the law, to make it whole. He came to show us what the law really is, to show us the mercy within it. In the first reading, the Lord's point regarding healing on the Sabbath was pretty simple. Mercy is more important than ritual, more important than the law per se. In the second reading from John, the Lord makes a similar statement regarding a similar miracle. But in that story he says, My doctrine is not mine, but his who sent me. If anyone wills to do his will, he shall know concerning the doctrine, whether it is from God or whether I speak on my own authority. When the Lord talks about the one who sent him, he's talking about his divine love. And the one sent is the divine truth going out from him. The Father means the Lord's love from which he sends to us. And the Son is the truth by means of which he shows himself. The Son is the Word that became flesh and dwelt among us. So the Father's will, which is the Lord's love, is what sends the teachings. It's what gives purpose to the teachings. From the vantage point of the Lord's love, everything he says falls into order and it becomes self-evident. It's the Lord's love that makes his truth true. And the reverse is true as well. It's his truth that makes his love loving. In the heavenly doctrines, we're told there are two things that make one, namely good and truth. Good is not good except it be from truth, and truth is not truth except it be from good. Consequently, it is only when these two make one that they have being and existence. There is no such thing as good without truth, or truth without good. Because if they're separated, they can no longer be called by those names. As an illustration, there is no such thing as a wife without a husband, or a husband without a wife. If they cease to be married, they're no longer called husband and wife. Good without truth has no shape and no reality. And truth without good has no purpose and no life. Or in the words of the heavenly doctrine, the good of love, devoid of the truth of faith, cannot give definition and particular character to anything, while the truth of faith, devoid of the good of love, cannot bring anything into effect. The Lord's truth is inseparable from his love. It is his love. They are married. They are one. When he speaks, his words are from divine mercy. Where the word is, his mercy is there. But we only really see this. We only see this mercy when we will to do his will, when we want what he wants. Because until then, we don't really want anything to do with his love. And without that love, his truth doesn't make sense. But while we're learning to do his will, the Lord helps us by doing the will of the Father himself. He shows us what the will of the Father looks like, expressed as the truth. So he healed on the Sabbath because he was Lord even of the Sabbath. He was the God who had spoken the law, and he had ordained the Sabbath as a day of rest, a day of healing. In John, he says to the crowd, if a man receives circumcision on the Sabbath so that the law of Moses should not be broken, are you angry with me because I made a man completely well on the Sabbath? And that doesn't quite follow until it's understood that the whole point of circumcision was to represent purification from evil. And purification from evil is spiritual healing. By healing on the Sabbath, the Lord was embodying exactly what the Sabbath is for. The Sabbath is a day to rest in the mercy of the Lord, a day to go to Him with our withered and impotent hands to be made whole. Going to the Lord for mercy and healing is how the Sabbath is kept. So the Lord said, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Healing the man with the withered hand was a better fulfillment of the Sabbath law than all of the observances that the Pharisees were anxious to enforce. And so He didn't tell them that they were wrong for wanting to keep the law. He told them that they didn't understand the law. Do not judge according to appearance, He said, but judge with righteous judgment. Righteous judgment is judgment from an understanding of what is right or what is loving. That is, it's judgment from an understanding of God's love. Righteous judgment is judgment from the knowledge of God, and the knowledge of God is mercy. Good and truth are married in us when we see the truth. And we see that the truth is the form or the expression of what is loving. And so we love to do what is true. Good and truth are married in us when we will to do the Lord's will as revealed in His Word. We're not the judges of what's true, and we're not the judges of what is loving. The Pharisees thought that they understood the law. They thought they were the enforcers of the Sabbath, and so they condemned the Lord of the Sabbath. If we don't humble ourselves before the Lord's teachings, if we don't bind ourselves to the observance of His law, then we end up looking for truth outside of Him, where there is no truth. And His love can't find a home there. But observing the Lord's teachings alone is also not enough. If we obey His law without compassion, without tenderness, without wanting to see Him bring healing to every soul, then we have not understood His law. His will is mercy. When the will of God and the Word of God make one in us, then mercy and truth have met. Righteousness